So, closing up here, we're getting near the end. Yay! Best practices going forward as bibliographic catalogers. Understand the basic differences between RDA and AACR2 records. So even if all you come away with is AACR2 has more abbreviations and RDA has the 33X fields, you've got a very good basic grasp. This is good. This is a starting place. And remember, you can go to the templates in the best practices to get more guidance on what a good RDA record looks like. Understand the differences between the subject and genre form headings, mainly that genre form go in 655 and subject go in other 600 fields. That will usually carry you through. Understand the component parts of a record that make it a good catalog record. And you guys know this. I mean, you look at records and judge whether they're good or bad all the time. It's just a matter of thinking about it at this point and reminding yourself to think about it. You get into a rut with cataloging and you're just going along. You're like, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. Now think good, why? Bad, why? And take a couple extra minutes and just think about why it's good or it's bad. Because you may find that some of the stuff you thought was good actually isn't as good as you thought, or some of the stuff that you thought was bad is actually not that bad. So this is your opportunity to just think a little harder about what you're already doing. Always examine your records for accuracy, no matter who created it. Remember, even if it says, Sonia created this, from the handouts, there could be massive problems with this thing. It depends on the day. So don't trust anybody. If it's something you created, go ahead and look it over. You never know. And the rules change too. So what you created a year ago and it was perfect, you may be like, wait, that heading should really be a genre heading. It may now be an available genre heading that you couldn't use earlier. And you can make some changes. So, just because it looks like a good record, you should probably evaluate, because the rules are changing pretty constantly. If you thought cataloging was going to be the nice, boring desk job where you learned something and then you just sort of phoned it in every day at work, surprise! Understand the difference between monographs, monographic sets, serials, and series. We didn't hit on this too much today, but it is something that is outlined in your best practices fairly nicely. So short story monographs are basically your single units. So this would be like a book. Monographic sets are sets that come out all at once or come out over a defined part of time. So this is your encyclopedias or your series of a TV show. Serials are things like magazines where there's no set end in sight. And a series is monographs that get pulled together by something, whether it's a specific subject that ties them together or an author and a subject. So you can have a series by a single author that's about a certain character, or you can have a series that's about a certain subject that's by a bunch of different authors. So that's the basic nutshell difference, but that's outlined in the best practices, probably using much of the same vocabulary. Take some time, especially now, while you're coming fresh out of these workshops, to look at the coded information in the fixed fields, the 007, anything where stuff is coded and where you've usually glanced at it and said, oh God, no, and run the other way. Now take a few minutes and just look at it. Pull up the color-coded sheets, the examples. If you need color-coded sheets for things other than books, let me know. I probably have them. If I don't, I'm going to need to create them at some point for something, so I can throw something together. But this is really important and really affects what happens with the catalog, so it's worth becoming familiar with and just looking at as you go along. And then as you go, make sure you're consulting those cataloging best practices frequently, because this is a living, changing document that you can't necessarily count on to stay the same from month to month right now. Later on, it'll become a little more stable, but even then, you'll want to check on it now and then because it's something that's going to change as you need it to change, which means you can't count on it just always being the same rules, but you also don't have to be stuck with the same rules that don't work. It's a trade-off. So as you get ready for your assessment, there is an assessment for this. Look at the best practices. Remember that the assessment is open book. You can use the best practices, you can use your notes, you can use my PowerPoint, whatever. And you can take the assessment as many times as you need to until you've finished it, until you've done everything and satisfied the requirements. And it's not, you're not going to be penalized if you don't pass the assessment the first time or two. Who cares? This is about practicing and getting familiar with what you're doing and learning the new etiquette that comes with being part of a consortium that's coming up with, these universal rules that everyone's going to follow. And you may not pick everything up at once, so go back and try it again later. Look at records and get familiar with what good RDA records look like. If you're looking for good RDA records, Library of Congress does have some sample RDA records. You can just Google Library of Congress sample RDA records. They come up. Those are pretty good. They're not... The thing I hate about them is they were obviously created by a bunch of academic librarians. So I go in and I'm looking at okay, let's look at what a good serial record looks like. What's a good record for a magazine? And it's all journals about Taiwanese medicine and pig culture. It's like these really serious journals instead of just a magazine. So you'll find some stuff that's applicable to what you're doing and some stuff that's a little bit weird. RDA also has sample records, so once you're into RDA Toolkit, you can look at their samples. And if all else fails and you need some samples of a certain thing and you're just not sure what to do, let me know. I probably have samples because if it's out there, I've probably cataloged it. Today we figured out I have not cataloged a live animal yet, but that has been done. There are especially universities where they have therapy dogs that you can check out and play with, especially around final exam time. Especially the Ivy Leagues, they think they're going to give people nervous breakdowns, so they have therapy dogs you can check out, and they've been cataloged in those catalogs, and it's magical. So at some point I may just catalog one of my dogs just to try it out. They wouldn't mind. Come here, Teddy. Let me measure you. 500 note. Largest corgi in history of world.
Is that centimeters with a dot or with the
well, and do you measure a dog with centimeters or inches? This could be fun. I'm going to have to go into this. Or do you do feet at a certain point? This is a Great Dane. Do we just go with really big in the 300 field and just move on? Bigger than you. I'm going to have to play with those. That sounds fun. Look at records to see the similarities and differences among catalog records for different types of resources. So you can see quickly the difference between an ebook record and a book record and an audiobook record, even if the icons aren't showing up correctly. Or if you're importing something into the catalog and you aren't completely sure what it is. Just looking at these over and over again can help you notice those differences very quickly and save you time later on. Look at the catalog records and evaluate them for accuracy, and go ahead and start fixing errors. Start looking for things that aren't right and go ahead and fix them. And don't freak out if you're not completely sure you're fixing it correctly. Check with somebody. Send an email to one of these lovely people on the cataloging committee, or send an email to me. Take a screenshot of the record that you've fixed and say, does this look right? Or, if it's in the Cardinal thing and there's a way you can share it and put it in a bucket and say, look at this before I publish it, Just have people look at your stuff if you're at all unsure. And remember that if you do something wrong, you can always go back and fix it. Or somebody else will. It's really not that big a deal. You don't want big mistakes. You want to learn, but sometimes the best way to learn is to make the mistakes. So get out there and actually start trying. Look at those fixed fields, the 007s, just get used to what those look like, and examine the subject and genre form headings in the catalog records just to get used to what good headings look like. And if there are some that you keep seeing show up for this type of stuff that you catalog, put them in a notebook somewhere so that you have them the next time that you need to create some and you're like, oh, I know what heading that was I was using. It was a really good one. Oh, here it is. And you're good to go. I mean, if you're cataloging a lot of similar stuff frequently, copy records. Keep them on hand for when you need that information again. I do it all the time. I have all sorts of notebooks of sample records because it's just easier that way. Any questions? We went right up to the wire today. All right. Yeah, you guys are done.